Thank you very much, Rachel. So the pediatric and adolescent populations carry a disproportional burden of infectious disease. In fact, more than half of deaths in LMIC is caused by infectious disease among these populations. 3 million children and adolescents die from infectious disease each year, and that translates into 1 child or adolescent dying every 10 seconds from infectious disease. Children under 5 years of age are vulnerable mostly to malaria, pneumonia, diarrhea, HIV, and TB. Older children primarily are seeing HIV and TB affecting them. And we have done somewhat better job with children under 5 in recent years. However, the burden of disease is shifting to older children. And if you look at these complex graphs below, on your side, I want you to look at the graphs above, because despite the fact that we have been focusing on mortality so many years, we're now focusing on the disability. And these are years lost to disability because of infectious disease. Very little progress has done there. And it is difficult to treat pediatric infectious disease. There is insufficient development availability of age-appropriate formulations. They are poorly testing. There is a study figure there on your slide that demonstrates the poor testing medications and systemic review of pediatric drugs, and infectious disease medications, including HIV, are by far outbeating any other pediatric morbidity. For injectable formulations, it's mostly frequent dosing. All of it produces suboptimal adherence. And we also know that children have variable PK and plasma concentrations, many times due to malabsorption. Malnutrition is highly prevalent in children, food intake, and drug-drug interactions. We also know that children have higher rates of antimicrobial and antiviral resistance. So long-acting solutions look quite attractive and appealing for children. Here you see the array of pictures I just Googled on the internet that represent them. However, when we develop them, we are dealing with moving therapeutic target of the growing child. And this population is highly heterogeneous, ranging from premature infants of less than 2 kilograms to adolescents who can lift me in my clinic room and put me aside if they disagree with me. They're continuously growing, and their PK, biology, physiology, it's all evolving. We are not only thinking about safety on the short term, we're thinking about long-term consequences of drug exposure during the process of development and maturation. And finally, for infectious disease, there are quite significant differences in certain diseases for diagnostic, clinical characteristics, and course of infectious diseases that will affect your PD targets as well. Beyond this level of challenges, there is another level of challenges with ethical, regulatory challenges, and cost challenges. And all of them are making the pediatric clinical trials a minority among all clinical trials conducted globally. And honestly saying, money runs the show many times, and the market for pediatric dosage forms is relatively small. It's risky and less profitable than that of adults. However, these challenges are not unsurmountable. And this is just a snapshot of the key partners that got together to move forward the agenda on the pediatric antiretroviral drugs primarily, and then adding anti-infectives, and now expanding in other areas like oncology. We have well-defined definitions, well-defined definition sounds weird, but well-defined parameters for the long-acting for antiretrovirals, probably best defined parameters than any other disease. And I'm very proud to tell you that as of today, we already have adolescent choice for the full ART regimen in suppressed individuals, and we also have an injectable PrEP available for adolescents starting at 35 kilograms and 12 years of age. PADO process has identified a really nice mapping, and for all drug developers, I've been referring them there. This is a mapping by age and the product, including micro needle array patch, which is MAP, injectable, implantable formulations, both or for all indications, PNP, ART, PrEP use, and for all of them, we highlight the need for dose adjustability, particularly for younger children, but importantly, issues of tolerability, acceptability, ease and schedule, and capacity for discrete use. And what I have done, I've tried to give you a little snapshot on acceptability data today. This is focused primarily only on antiretrovirals. For MAP, the qualitative user study of simulated prototype use with direct observation and desk interviews data were just presented this month by PAS in Brisbane. meeting weekly and monthly use, highly acceptable, and also some suggested indicators are going to be taken forward. For implant, there are a couple of studies from South Africa, one among caregivers, just published, not shown on the slide, and another one among healthcare providers. Most welcome, though caregivers expressed much more reservations, and also raising some key concerns about pain, stigmatization, biodegradation, and caregivers not shown on the slide showing concern for efficacy. For BNABs, proof of concept study of BNABs in children who with early start of ART when the treatment was interrupted, and they went just on BNABs monthly IV in Natella, Botswana cohort, excellent study, showed that preferred BNABs were significantly preferred over ART prior and post-intervention. And how about adolescents? For IM injections, MOCA cohort, we know that we saw the data presented at Munich last year, week 48 results, 140 use, median age of 15 years. I can tell there is much more detailed acceptability data forthcoming, but high level of acceptability, tolerability throughout the whole 48 weeks. And for sub-Q injections at CROI this year, Purpose 1 presented sub-study among 25 use within death interviews, highly acceptable, but alternative injection site preferred. So this is just a glimpse of some acceptability data, though methodology for these studies varies widely, and there is an international call for harmonization of the methods, how we measure that. Well, let's start with neonates and infants as we move along the trajectory of children. There is a big demand for PNP and for ART. We have limited ART options. Even in modern era, adherence remains a challenge. There is a concern for maternal drug exposure, pretreatment resistance. They have small bodies. They have small muscle mass. They have limited skin surface, but they are growing very fast. We also can diagnose them quite fast, and we also have a quite well-defined period of maternal exposure through breastfeeding where 1/3 of pediatric infection is acquired. So these are beneficial elements. Capacity to bypass oral and GI absorption is of a great appeal in pediatric populations, and we do know from previous pharmacokinetic studies that it's easier to extrapolate the data from adults for sub-Q and IM administration versus oral administration. So what's going on in the arena for PNP for the long-acting antiretrovirals? Well, the CREATE study started, I believe, recruitment already this month, and there will be opportunity to measure there the washout PK, and we can also see neonatal safety signal. Long-acting CAP for PNP protocol is being developed by VIF, and that one is going to offer long-acting CAP intramuscular injections in the thigh of newborns in addition to standard of care PNP. Long-acting cabotegravir MAP was in development until recent funding cuts and is currently placed on hold. And finally, long-acting LAN for PNP obviously is of great interest to pediatric community. Pediatric plan development is being considered, and information shared here was obtained in individual consultations with drug developers. And for all the references you have seen, I will have a QR code at the end. For BNABs for PNP, definitely a place for the children. They are exceptional. They are acquiring a lot of contacts with mothers through breastfeeding. It's a completely different mechanism of transmission. And we strongly believe that here, opposite to the adults, 1 or 2 BNABs may eliminate breast milk transmission, and we just need to focus on finding the best 1 or 2 candidates. There is a lot of effort and work going on around BNABs in children, and they're very attractive from pharmacokinetic point of view. Dose volumes are small. They are suitable for IM sub-Q injections. They have favorable safety profile in already completed neonatal and infant study. They have modest bioavailability differences in postnatal period. The single PK dose studies are quite informative, and there is a slow decline in plasma concentrations. So last summer, the action plan was released to follow WHO placement of BNABs on the priority timeline. And you can see multiple partners on this slide who are working as a consortium to combine best-in-class antibodies in the phase 1 and 2A development. Well, how about treatment with BNABs? Well, we already mentioned proof of concept study by a Natella cohort, and there have been some other movements there. And currently, there is a really interesting ENABLE trial trial, planned to roll out in next year by Penta. This one focuses on infants because we know that even with current ART treatment available, we're still having very low rates of viral suppression during the first 12 months, high morbidity, mortality. In this phase 1/2 study, they are going to compare the virological outcome between standard of care and standard of care plus the two BNAPS candidates. You have seen them on the slide. They're subject to change. That will be given at 3, 6, and 9 months on ART. And secondary outcomes will include comparing mortality, morbidity, safety. And this study will also continue advancing our understanding about biomarkers in response to BNAPS, specifically in young children. Well, how about long-acting treatments for children? The IMPACT CRAYON study is enrolling children between 2 to under 12 years of life with a weight below 40 kilos, above 10 kilograms. And I'm very happy to say this is a protocol that adopted the best practices and key recommendations by WHO for the novel design of pediatric clinical trials. They extensively use PK modeling, WHO weight-band dosing, and simultaneous enrollment across different weight bands. In study arms 1 and 2A, will be transitioned from suppressive oral therapy to oral cabral pivoting and an injectable, and in 2B, directly going to injectable, and recruitment is ongoing in South America, Asia, US, and in Africa, obviously. They presented the pilot data at CROI this year. 35 participants enrolled across all 3 cohorts, weight bands, and all 3 weight bands, not cohorts yet. And administration really showed at 24 children in PK analysis with a weight between 20 to 40 kilo, that through week 12 they achieved exposures comparable to adolescents, adults, and no new anticipated safety signal among 20 children who completed safety analysis by week 12. There's also consideration by the VIF to develop potentially plans for ultra-long cap. However, cabotegravir and rilpivirine are not the best and ultimate solution for all children with HIV in adolescents, because we know they have lower rates of viral suppression and they have high rates of pretreatment and acquired NNRTI resistance. And to address this issue, there are currently 2 trials that are going on. Phase 3 trial, CROWN trial. It's adult trial, but it's enrolling also adolescents, recruiting in Spain and United States, no recruitment in LMICs. And second protocol, recruitment in South Africa, and then opening recruitment in the US for long-acting lenacapavir. According to the approved PEEP, it's going to look at the use of it with optimized backbone in children with MDR HIV. The only comment there is that the exclusion criteria, as you know, for these trials include multiple morbidities. It's very hard to find children in sub-Saharan Africa who have MDR HIV and don't have multiple comorbidities. And seeking new long-acting ART partnerships. I've spoken with several companies in the room and online and organizing and supporting this conference, and also have looked at some PEEPs, but most PEEPs in treatment is usually virologically suppressed children. It's usually waived under age of 2, and it's on stable ART for transition to stable ART. Lenacapavir islatravir PEEP is approved starting 2 years. An oral weekly study in adults is planned to be extended in children. MAP is in preclinical development for this combination for once monthly dosing by PASS. Other combinations being explored are NRTTI prodrug plus lenacapavir or NRTIs, and pediatric development plans under considerations. They are not developed, but they are under consideration for weekly, monthly, and other frequency. And finally, I listed a couple of examples, one from VFRAM from Gilead, on combination of long-acting, ultra-long-acting, and BNABs. Well, let's move into adolescents. Here, the need grows back to prevention, and we can celebrate the success of HPTN 8301 and HPTN 84, one slide, and purpose trial, adult trials that simultaneously enrolled adolescents. We saw excellent adolescent data at CROI this year on lenacapavir, and it's part of the FDA review package, so we are looking forward to have this drug potentially for the adolescents as well for the prevention. And there are 2 Gilead purpose family protocols being rolled out for adolescents, for adults inclusive of adolescents, starting at 16 years and weight of 35 kilograms. One is looking at lenacapavir prodrug orally once weekly, and another one lenacapavir intramuscularly once a year. And there are some other long-acting ARVs that are being considered but currently not in development. And finally, when talking about adolescents, we need to come back to the topic of MPT, multipurpose technology. Why? Because we do know epidemic affects a lot adolescent females and young adults, young adult women. 21 million pregnancies in adolescent girls each year. 4,000 adolescent girls and young women acquire HIV every week. Most of MPT products target HIV and pregnancy together, but and most of them are a local application, not long-acting, are quite limited. However, we do need to know how adolescents, would they use this product? As Charlie stated this morning, we don't want to develop a product that's not going to be used. And very interestingly, just published study across 55 LMIC countries looking at the girls 15 to 19 years old. They actually rely mostly on short-term contraception, and they frequently stop using contraception even when they don't want to become pregnant. So we need to better understand this population needs and wants. And I do want to say that unfortunately just recently halted ATN 168 protocol. HAPI was looking into acceptability of long-acting MPTs, but ongoing Conrad Horizon study has adolescent girls and young women, and we'll get this data soon. And finally, in the last few minutes, I want to step out of HIV world and look at other anti-infectives for children and adolescents. For pediatric end, one of the first things that we want to achieve is harmonization of the weight band dosing across different diseases. Currently, each of these diseases have different dosing guidelines with different band weights. And recently, health policy moved by WHO and collaborators proposes to harmonize them, at least for major infections like TB, HIV, malaria, hepatitis C, and potentially others. And I would argue that this will also help to streamline development of long-acting formulations. There is a longevity project, and I'm pretty sure we're going to hear about it during this conference, that's targeting development of long-acting anti-infectives, and I'm very happy to see two indications they're relevant to pediatric populations, along with injectable cure for hepatitis C infection, but for kids specifically MAP for TB and malaria prevention, targeting infants and children, and injectable formulation for TB. But in fact, WHO convened a PADO-like EMPADO process for the pediatric TB formulations recently, and long-acting formulations for TB have been placed on the PADO watch list for kids, particularly with interest to injectable and microarray patches. And here, clearly, there are benefits of improved bioavailability by bypassing oral intake, decreasing spectrum of DDI, which was mentioned earlier already, assuring TPT success and treatment succession. Most of the TB drugs are in preclinical development. However, the first bedaquiline long-acting injectable protocol is rolling. The pediatric community is watching it very closely, and there is also consideration for rifampicin as isoniazid considered for weekly MAP delivery. And for malaria as well, the same benefits would apply for parenteral use. The first phase 1 clinical trials in healthy volunteers is ongoing for malaria that is potentially protecting up to 3 months against all types of malaria. There is already potential partner drug identified, and I was very happy to read on the product development pipeline that this combination product that will be designed to complement existing interventions, treat asymptomatic malaria, but also provide seasonal malaria chemo prevention for children under the age of 5 and intermittent preventive treatment of malaria in pregnancy. So very nice to see that those have been identified as a product profile for future development. In summary, long-acting agents have a potential to optimize prevention, treatment, and outcome of infectious disease in children and populations. But development of these drugs faces magnitude of challenges, and we are not hiding from acknowledging them. However, they shouldn't stop us. Innovative pediatric clinical trial design with Bayesian approach and others, the key principles by WHO could really advance these technologies. And finally, end-user studies are critical in designing, but not only designing, but adjusting the designed products to fit the needs for this population. I started my presentation with the title, Are We Nearly There Yet? Those of you who ever took a long car ride with children know that 30 minutes into the ride, the question starts, are we there nearly yet? And I use here the quote of Charlie, who said with colleagues in the paper that the concept of long-acting is a relative one and is based on frequency of dosing and other treatments available for the same disease. But time is not passing at the same speed for us and for children. And it seems to going faster as we grow. In fact, here listed on the slide, the quote from excellent investigator from Liverpool says, for example, for 7 years old, the year is 14% of your entire life, but at 70 years old, it is only 1.4%. So I would say it's also relative, Charlie, to the age and stage of life where you are. And I would probably argue that the benefit of long-acting can be much more for kids, because for them, the time between treatments will be a much bigger proportion of their lives. So acknowledging people helped me think through, had discussions with me, reviewed the PIPE products, and thanking you for your attention.